You're watching our special broadcast. I'm Parikshit Luthra. Tragic developments from Ahmedabad. An Air India plane carrying 242 people crashed near the city's airport minutes after takeoff. The Boeing 787 Dreamliner was en route to London, had 2 pilots and 10 cabin crew on board. The aircraft had departed from the airport at 1:39 p.m. this afternoon and was headed to London's Gatwick Airport when it crashed into a medical college hostel. 169 Indian nationals, 53 British nationals, 1 Canadian national, 7 Portuguese were on board. Aviation regulator DGCA has said that the aircraft's pilot gave a mayday call, but no response was given by the aircraft thereafter to the calls made by the air traffic control. And then the aircraft crashed outside the airport perimeter immediately after leaving the runway. A mayday call is a distress call used to signal a life-threatening emergency. The police said that the plane crashed into a hostel of a medical college. Police, fire brigade and first responders are at the site of the crash. Prime Minister Modi called the incident heartbreaking and beyond words. United Kingdom Prime Minister Keir Starmer called the mishap devastating.
लगातार पिछले 2-2.5 घंटे से हमारी टीम उस पर काम कर रही है। हमारे सेक्रेटरी है, डीजीसीए है, एआई की टीम है, सभी लोग, हमारी विकास की टीम, सभी लोग एक साथ बैठकर वहाँ पे काम कर रहे हैं। और अभी हम डीजीसीए, हमारे सेक्रेटरी और मैं तो हम तो वहाँ पे अभी फिजिकली भी जा रहे हैं। प्रधानमंत्री जी इसका मॉनिटरिंग कर रहे हैं। माननीय प्रधानमंत्री जी ने नायडू जी से हमारी सभी लोगों से बात भी की है, वो मॉनिटरिंग कर रहे हैं। हमारे होम मिनिस्टर वहां पे पहुंच रहे हैं और मुझे लगता है कि सभी स्तर पे ये अभी राहत का कार्य बड़ी इमरजेंसी के लेवल पर शुरू
होगा। क्या सभी प्लेन का इंडिया के ऑडिट होगा?
नहीं, अभी तो आज मुझे लगता है कि पहली बात तो यह है कि हमें इससे पहले बाहर निकलना है। बाद में सब होगा, उसकी जांच होगी, उस पर रिपोर्ट आएंगे, उस पर असल में क्या रीजन है वो भी सामने आएगा। ये आज मुझे लगता है कि थोड़ा टाइम
इन दिनों कंपनीज जो है, सारी एयरलाइन कंपनीज, क्या वो बहुत सस्ता ले रही है क्या लोगों के जान को लेकर? क्योंकि कोई भी बारिश हो जाए तो प्लेन में कुछ होगा।
मुझे लगता है कि कोई जो रियल उसका रीजन है वो सामने आने तक थोड़ा सा हमें पेशेंस रखना चाहिए।
सर, जहाँ पे प्लेन गिरा वहाँ पे कुछ कैजुअलिटी हुई है?
लगता है, लगता तो है, लेकिन थोड़ा सा मुझे लगता है कि ऑफिशियली थोड़ा सा
बिल्डिंग में कुछ लोग रह रहे थे ऐसे भी।
सर, डॉक्टर्स हॉस्टल बताया जा रहा है
नहीं, यहाँ से एनडीआरएफ की टीम भी गई है, वहाँ पे बाकी सेना दल की टीम भी गई है। मुझे लगता है कि सभी जो टीमें हैं सभी लेवल पे वहाँ पे काम शुरू हुआ।
Right, a very tragic incident there. Plane crash at the Ahmedabad Airport. Joining us right now is Shivani Bazaz. Shivani, the aviation minister is rushing to the location. Give us a sense of what we know so far.
Well, Parikshit, absolutely a big tragedy over there. An Air India Dreamliner flight AI-171 bound for London's Gatwick crashed just minutes after takeoff from the Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel International Airport. Now, the DGCA has confirmed that the aircraft departed at 1:39 p.m. today, and soon after, the pilot gave a mayday call to the air traffic control, and no further response was received from the cockpit, and the aircraft crashed outside the airport perimeter in what appears to be a catastrophic mid-climb failure. There were 242 people on board, including crew members. Emergency teams were immediately mobilized to the site. Now, the aviation regulator says that contact was lost with the aircraft within minutes of departure. The crash site lies just beyond the airport, and the rescue operations have been underway throughout the afternoon. Civil Aviation Minister Ram Mohan Raidu said that centre is on highest alert, with all the agencies instructed to act swiftly. Rescue and medical teams have been deployed across Ahmedabad, and coordination is being overseen at the highest levels. Now, in a statement, Air India chairman N. Chandrasekharan said that the airline's primary focus right now is on supporting those impacted. He confirmed that an emergency centre has been activated with dedicated support teams assisting families and working with local authorities. Aircraft maker Boeing has also released a brief statement saying it is aware of the initial reports and is currently gathering more information. Gujarat Police, as you mentioned earlier, in its statement has said that the Air India flight has crashed into the doctor's hostel, and the police and other agencies reached the spot immediately. This is a developing story, as we have been tracking. Investigators from DGCA and Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau are already on the site, and the Minister of Civil Aviation is also on the way. And more information is expected in the next next few hours. For now, the focus remains on emergency response and ensuring every possible support to the victims and their families. Back to you.
All right. Thank you, Shivani, for joining us. Indeed, a disturbing and developing story. And the focus right now would be to reach out to everyone who is affected, their family members, and also find survivors on board. And the fire brigade, police authorities are doing just that on the ground in Ahmedabad. And of course, there will be efforts to investigate the cause of crash as well. We're now joined by Captain Wadia, founder, president of Federation of Indian Airlines. We'll also have other guests on board. Let me go across to Captain Wadia at this point. Captain Wadia, now this is an aircraft that had been in service for almost 11 years. It was being flown by very experienced pilots. Could you give us a sense of what may have gone wrong within minutes of takeoff?
Right. It's too early right now to speculate what's gone wrong. And I'm sure everyone will be asking those questions. However, I'd like to throw a little bit of light on that particular subject. This particular aircraft has taken off, and I'm sure immediately after takeoff, he puts his undercarriage up. Now, this aircraft has reached an altitude of 600 feet and declared an emergency. In this short period of time, maybe in just 1 or 2 minutes, the pilot has realized that something drastically wrong has happened. Now, what could have happened? I'll just give you 2 examples where it's too early to speculate. For example, I have flown a jumbo with 4 engines, and on takeoff, you had multiple bird hits, and we reject the takeoff, and eventually found that 3 engines had burnt up on a jumbo. So it is possible that you could have had multiple bird hits also. Or it could have been also possible to have a technical failure like fuel starvation or some technical failure. But for normal technical failures like an engine failure or single bird hit, the pilot is trained and the aircraft is capable of flying normally and doing a normal landing back.
All right. Okay, sir, I'll request you to hold on for a second. We're just cutting across to the Ministry of External Affairs. The spokesperson, Randhir Jaiswal, is addressing the media, and he is speaking about the Ahmedabad plane crash.
Detail. Now, a specific question that you asked, Shivam, responding to that, I would say that there are existing mechanisms between Indian and Canadian law enforcement agencies that have discussed issues of mutual security concern over a period of time. This engagement is likely to continue. Sumita, your question about rare earths.
That was the External Affairs spokesperson speaking about the plane crash in Ahmedabad. Let me go back to our guest. We're joined by Mr. Sivaraman, who is the former DGCA chief. Mr. Sivaraman, could you give us a sense of what will be the steps that will now take place in terms of investigating the cause, the protocol that is put into place, the effort that will be put in to find survivors?
There are 2 things which I want to say here. As Captain Wadia said, a very seasoned, experienced pilot, I don't think I can add much to what he has stated. However, these aircrafts have got equipments by which they can transfer all the flight data recordings onto the ground. And this was there in force even 30 years ago with all these sophisticated aircraft. Now we have to recover the DFDR and the CVR. If the Air India had these facilities to get the onboard recording of the DFDR onto their ground facilities, then they will be able to find out immediately, even before the DFDR is recovered and decoded, they will be able to find out the flight path of the aircraft and the problems, if any, that can be found out from the DFDR. That should be immediately looked into by the DGSA as well as the accident investigation authorities. Secondly, it is very essential to recover the CVR immediately because the pilot, after giving a mayday call, went silent. Why did he go silent? Immediately after the mayday call. So these are very important things which have to be attended to immediately. Secondly, as far as the facilities are concerned for the people who have been injured or those who have lost their dear ones, I think the airport authorities and all the other emergency facilities have acted with great alacrity, and one could see them working in extreme conditions. And I think I will congratulate them for taking such effective and immediate steps.
Right, absolutely. Let me also ask you about now what happens with the Boeing fleet, the Dreamliner fleet that we have. Do you expect certain questions to be asked of the company, maybe a thorough audit also to be carried out, or do you think this would be a specific incident and would be treated as such?
This should be treated as an incident because you cannot ground the entire 787 fleet because of one crash. And it is very necessary to find out before taking any such very rash step, I would say, as it happened in the case of Airbus 320 aircraft. One should examine the records of this aircraft immediately underground by the DGCA and other authorities, including the airline authorities, to see whether everything was proper as regards this aircraft is concerned. It would have been proper, otherwise it would not have been certified for flight to London. So I'm very certain that the aircraft would have been thoroughly examined on the ground before its flight, and the officers would have certified it as ready for flight. So I don't think any purpose will be served in grounding all the aircraft because of this one crash. There may be hundreds of 787 flying all across the world.
Absolutely. Let me go back to Captain Wadia. Captain Wadia, we are, of course, getting some reports that the plane had crashed immediately after takeoff from Ahmedabad. 242 people were on board. There was a mayday call, but thereafter no response was given by the aircraft to the calls made by the ATC. It seems that the plane's engine may have lost thrust. Landing gears were also still down. Do you think whatever happened only after the flight took off and there could be external reasons and perhaps multiple bird hits in a short span of time would be the most possible reason?
No, there will be a lot of reasons, but let me correct you. I wouldn't go for so far as to mention that the gear was still down. I would presume that the gear was retracted immediately after takeoff, because that's what you do when you're about 50 to 100 feet after takeoff, in a few seconds after takeoff. So I think in the visuals that I saw, I could think that the gear was lowered when the aircraft was coming down. So what was very clear to me is the pilot knew that he was in some dire emergency. That is why, first of all, he made a mayday call. Secondly, at that point in time in flight, about 600 feet, the gear is normally supposed to be up. The very fact that he had put the gear down, he was expecting the aircraft to land or crash. And the manner in which it came down, you could imagine it was landing on a runway straight ahead. The wings were level, the gear was down, as if it was doing a normal landing. So I think the pilot has got to great extent to ensure that this is, I wouldn't call it a crash, I would call it a pilot crash landing, where he's taken efforts to minimize the impact, to minimize the damage to the aircraft and to the passengers. And maybe because of his efforts, maybe some passengers are still safe and maybe alive still. We don't know the exact figures. Maybe no one is alive still. But it is possible, the very fact that the aircraft has come down smoothly and it has broken up, the fuselage has broken up, and part of it is on top of some building also. It is possible that you may have some survivors from the passengers.
That, of course, is a very important piece of news, and we would be waiting for that heartening piece of news, Captain Wadia. In fact, we're withholding the names of the pilots so far, but they had almost 8,200 hours and 1,100 hours of flying experience. So these are very experienced pilots, isn't it, Captain Wadia?
It is, absolutely. I would say the aircraft was fine. The pilots were well qualified and well trained. So I don't, because what sort of emergency they face at that point in time, it is very difficult for us to speculate, especially at this point in time. Let's wait for more information to come in. We will find out whether, as you suggested, it could be a bird hit also, or it could be some mechanical failure, fuel starvation, or some such technical problem. And we'll have to wait for answers on that front.
Right. Mr. Sivaraman, are you also surprised that this happened with a Dreamliner?
I'm really surprised because Dreamliners are so perfect an aircraft. And as Captain Wadia said, the pilot has been driving his level best to land the aircraft. One could see that in your visuals. And So something very serious has happened, which I think only investigations can prove. Otherwise, it's an aircraft which normally, even if one engine fails, they can easily come back and land. And even if, for example, the elevators fail, the pilots are trained to somehow keep the aircraft in balance and bring it down. So the pilots are very qualified here. So we have to wait for the investigation, particularly the recovery of the DFDR and its decoding.
Right. Let me now go across to Mark Martin. He's joining us as well. Mark, considering present technologies, and I'm assuming it would be quite easy to find and identify and secure the flight data recorder at this point. Maybe it will be done in the next few hours. So do you expect a preliminary analysis of the investigation into the crash by later this evening, perhaps?
Thanks for having me. Very unfortunate today, but it's impossible that any report or any investigation, including preliminary or otherwise, can be released now. I think we need to hold our horses. We need to let this investigation process start. I'm going to put this out there. It's going to be painstakingly slow. They have to recover every part of the aircraft, put it into a hangar, reconstruct it, look at the CVR tapes, the DFDR, the ADS-B, the flight profile, the engine parameters, the ECTM. Every single element of record has to be brought together, investigated, studied, and only then you can come up with even a preliminary report, because it's even the preliminary report for this, an incident like this, will be at least 300 pages, where the final report should be at least 2,000 to 3,000 pages. Okay, so you know, I'd like to caution and be very, very clear, despite whoever's out there. Please do not speculate. The pilot is no more. The co-pilot is no more. Let's respect the dead. From what we know, this guy tried to take off. He obviously, my guess is that there was he had a power assurance issue. He tried to open power, go to MCT. He couldn't get the climb thrust he wanted. We don't know why that happened. Let's not speculate. Let's get to the bottom of this investigation. This is the first ever 787 Dreamliner crash ever. Okay, and in such an incident, I think it's very sad that we've seen something like this, at least in today's day and age. And my view on this is that Air India has been operating this since 2011 with error-free operation of the 787. 787 worked great for Air India. Sure, there were maintenance issues. Yes, there are spare part issues. Yes, but the aircraft never structurally broke. And the moment you transfer the ownership to a private airline, from a government-run airline, it goes to a private airline, we see a crash like this. I mean, doesn't that say something? Ever since Air India went to Tata Singapore Airlines, it has been an utter disaster. We have seen everything from air turnbacks to lavatories getting clogged, to Air India pilots being fined the highest in comparison to any airline. This is an Air India that's a private Air India. It's not a government Air India. We criticized Air India when it was part of the government. What about now? Who's responsible for this? Are you going to throw the book for airlines or Tatas? Enough. I think clearly we need to be very clear. The government needs to crack the whip, and we need to hold people accountable for this crash, because enough is enough.
Okay.
And this
Captain Wadia?
260 people perished. Okay, it's no joke. It's going to send
Mark, absolutely. Mark, we completely respect your views. Of course, there is a lot of anger. What has happened is extremely, extremely tragic. And as we've been reporting, our hats off to the pilots. They made all efforts to land the plane safely. There was clearly a very dire situation out there, as Captain Wadia was also pointing out. But Captain Wadia, on a preliminary analysis of whatever we know so far, the investigation may take a lot of time, but certain questions that come to your mind.
See, the safety record of India has never been really acceptable. And for the last 50 years, we've been trying to improve aviation safety and standards in India. It is the government. I'm sure everyone has good intentions. As everyone says, the government is trying its best, the Prime Minister is trying his best, but you must have knowledgeable people in DGCA and people who understand the business of accident analysis to address this issue. We need to have an independent safety board, just like the ones that exist in many countries. In India, it has existed tooth and nail by the DGCA, and the system of safety in India needs drastic improvements.
Right. We're also joined by aviation expert Sanjay Lazar. Sanjay Lazar, very, very tragic news that we are getting, of course, from Ahmedabad. And this is a developing story, so to say. But clearly there was a very unfortunate, very dire situation that developed. And the pilots did try to take control and land the aircraft safely. But unfortunately, that couldn't happen. We're still praying and hoping that there are survivors on board. And we will get reports from the hospital and from the police very soon. But your thoughts initially on what may have happened and what happens from here?
Well, first of all, it's a very sad day for Indian aviation and aviation globally. It's a huge loss. 787 has an excellent safety record, almost 1,200 of them flying, all around the world. But we've also learned, in recent minutes, in the last half an hour, that the pilot did send an ACAS message. And of course, I'm sure Mark and Captain Wadia may have spoken, and Mr. Sivaraman. But and he said there's no thrust, no lift. Plane is it was losing height. It gives us the clear impression now that there was something seriously wrong with the engines, or like people were speculating earlier, maybe an ingestion of something, birds, or I don't know what it was. But both engines seem to have lost power, and the aircraft started falling. The pilots, as probably been mentioned on your show, had close to 10,000 hours of experience, 8,200 for the PIC and 1,100 for the first officer, which is a significant amount of experience. To Captain Wadia's point, of course, we do require a independent safety board and a regulator, like the NTSB or whatever you have abroad. Over here, we've got one superpower organization that looks into almost everything, from fares to routes to safety to training, the works. But by and large, this is a very tragic day, and I'm praying that we get survivors, more survivors. From what I understand, there are 10 or 12 people who are in hospital. What condition they are, we do not know. We also know that about 40 bodies had been recovered until an hour ago. So I don't know what the situation is going beyond that.
Right.
Part of the aircraft we see in the visuals is broken on top of the hostel. The rest of it is in a residential area. So I'm assuming that there will be casualties on the ground as well, and we need to look at that. So the collector is probably looking into that. Yeah.
Absolutely. We're hoping for survivors. Mr. Sivaraman, if I can come to you from your experience, could you give us a sense of what will happen now in terms of the investigation? As our panelists pointed out, and Mark also pointed out, that even getting to know the preliminary cause of the crash will take possibly a long time, maybe months, if not weeks. What happens at this stage? Which are the bodies which are going to be involved?
First of all, we have an Accident Investigation Bureau, which is outside the pale of DGCA. It functions independently. And I do not know what more independence is required, because there is already an Accident Investigation Bureau, which consists of experts, and they will be on the job immediately. And secondly, as far as DGCA is concerned, he will only be assisting them, and I don't think he will be interfering in the investigation of the accident itself. The DGCA may probably conducting an audit of the records of this aircraft right from the beginning, from the day it was purchased till the day it went into this accident. That, of course, is the DGCA's job to see whether the aircraft has been maintained properly. It's, of course, very sad that such a company like Tata's have been getting into trouble as soon as they took over this airline into that fold, that they have been encountering one problem or the other. And in this particular case, I'm really scared that such an aircraft, which is supposed to have the best record of flying all over the world, has crashed immediately on takeoff. It is something very horrible, and I don't know. As far as the preliminary investigation is concerned, as you know, when the Airbus 320 aircraft crashed, what we did was we recovered the DFDR, we went through the DFDR, we decoded the DFDR, and we put into the simulator the same flight path of the accidented aircraft, and we could immediately find out what was the cause of the accident of the aircraft. Similar exercise could easily be done But of course, it would be a preliminary finding. It would not be a final finding. It could definitely be able to guide the investigators as to the reality behind the accident. Because if you put this data of the flight recorder into a simulator and fly the same path as the pilots have done in the case of this aircraft, you would know really what happened to this aircraft. And this is usually done, and this was what I did when the Airbus 320 crashed. And immediately within 2 days, we were able to find out what was the reason for the crash. Although we did not give out the findings, because the findings took a long time. There was the judicial inquiry into the whole thing. And finally, the judicial inquiry also came to the same conclusion.
Right. Now, of course, a lot will be found out, and I'm getting reports that there have been meetings at the Aviation Ministry and all records of this flight have been called for. Sanjay Lazar, so this seems to be an obvious step to get all the records. And this flight had landed from somewhere else a short while back before it took off for Ahmedabad. So I'm sure all those details are being analyzed to understand the health of the aircraft, the service and maintenance record as well. Sanjay.
Yes, of course. I believe the aircraft had come in from Delhi, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, obviously they would have done pre-flight checks, whether it's the ground engineer and the pilots in themselves. The records are open for everybody to look at. I don't know about, the difference in maintenance procedures now that it's a private company. But I do know, I can say this, that Air India has always had a very healthy safety and engineering record, and continues to do so. I do not know, what could have gone wrong at this particular juncture. The DGCA will look into the records. It's wrong for me to even speculate at this point or comment or cast aspersions. I just want to express my grief and solidarity with the, folks at Air India, because they've suffered a huge loss, and we don't know how, what the extent will be today. The nation has suffered a loss. Actually, it's, there are citizens of these countries here, and hearts go out to all of them.
Right. Captain Wadia, coming back to you, there wasn't much time for the captain of the aircraft to react. Whatever had to be done was probably you had to do it in a span of a few minutes. The options were limited as well. Could you give us a sense of perhaps what was the scenario when they took off from the airport? The terrain you were in was very, very clear. There was a distress situation. What could have possibly gone through the pilot's mind, the options available at that time?
Right. We are seeing it from an outside perspective when you're not visualizing what the pilot is going through in the cockpit. At that point in time, first of all, he takes off and does his normal checks after takeoff. And as soon as he's free from that and he encounters a serious emergency, yes, he's had time to inform the ATC, but he, as people say time and again, he didn't respond anymore. Obviously, he may not have time to even talk to the ATC because he's dealing with the situation in the cockpit. There's a serious emergency. Now, what sort of emergency is that? Whether it's some engine problem or whatever it is, he's handling that emergency. He and his co-pilot are talking to each other and trying to assess and handle that emergency. And in that time also, he is trying to see which is a safe place to land the aircraft, and he hasn't found anything, so he goes straight ahead and does a normal, smooth landing as if the runway is ahead of him. And obviously the aircraft breaks up and catches fire because the runway is not there and he goes into buildings, etc. So the pilot is very busy at that point of time, and he has no time to think of anything or even inform the ATC.
Absolutely. I'll request all our guests to stay with us. We're getting a soundbite from the British Foreign Secretary, David Lammy. He was speaking in the Parliament on the Ahmedabad plane crash. The plane was carrying 53 British nationals. Let's listen in to what David Lammy had to say.
My thoughts, and I'm sure those of the entire House, are with those who've been affected by the tragic plane crash in India this morning. We know that British nationals were on board, and Mr. Speaker, I can confirm that the FCDO is working urgently with local authorities to support British nationals and their families, and has stood up a crisis team in both Delhi and in London.
All right, and still with us are Sanjay Lazar, aviation expert, Mr. Sivaraman, a former DGCA chief, and Captain Wadia. Sanjay, if I can come to you, what will this mean now for Air India? The questions that Air India would have to face in the coming months?
First of all, it'll mean a lot of heartbreak and pain, before we go to what it'll mean. Otherwise, I think we need to be sensitized to the fact that there are 250 human lives here. A lot of them, Indian families here, plus the crew and the passengers. So I think that's the first trauma that Air India will have to deal with, that the Indian government will have to deal with, and the Ministry of Civil Aviation. Beyond that, of course, the investigation and the process that the
All right, we seem to have lost that link with Sanjay Lazar, but let me go back to Captain Wadia at this point. Now, Captain Wadia, as far as the probe goes, what role would Boeing, what role would the makers of the flight's engine have to play here? Would the Indian government, would the DGCA have already made contact with them right now?
Oh, yes. Any accident, all of the people are definitely involved. Irrespective, you may have an investigating team of a few people, maybe 5 or 7 people, but the manufacturers of the aircraft and the engines and any other allied agencies will have to be involved, and they are normally involved in the investigation totally. And since you asked the question of DGCA, the DFDR, Digital Flight Data Recorder, let me tell you, first of all, the CVR, the cockpit voice recorder, is a separate issue. You can get access to the cockpit voice recorder almost immediately, and you'll know what they will be talking in the cockpit. But the details of the DFDR take a long time. They come in digital form, and they come in various formats that have to be analyzed in detail. And so in the next couple of weeks, you will not even have details of the DFDR. So that has to be studied properly. And that will, as Captain Sivaraman already explained, if you put them into a simulator, it will give you exactly what has actually happened on the aircraft.
Absolutely. Mr. Sivaraman, we understand that the Aviation Ministry, there is a lot of activity. The DGCA chief, the Aviation Secretary are all holding continuous meetings. A DGCA team is also leaving for Ahmedabad. We've also seen how the Aviation Minister has left. What's really the protocol in times of a plane crash, a tragedy of this kind?
From my experience, I can tell you, normally after a plane crash, there was a very serious plane crash in Palam Airport when Mr. Narasimha Rao was the Prime Minister. He also visited the site. I was with him when that plane crashed. It was a Tu-154 of the aircraft which had been taken on lease by the Indian Airlines. But the entire investigation and supervision was left to the professionals in the area. So in my opinion, this should be left to professionals, senior people like Captain Wadia and others who have flown such aircraft, similar aircraft in similar circumstances. So they should be consulted, and we should exclude politics, company quarrels, everything out of it, and get to the bottom of it. And there should be one man who should be supervising it, and he should be a technically qualified person, and the responsibility should be on him rather than on any other people. Too many people will spoil the broth here. This is a highly technical issue, and it should be left only to the technical people. As Captain Wadia and others said, people from the builders of the aircraft, that is the Boeing, the engine manufacturers, the navigation equipment manufacturers, the communication people, everyone should be associated with the investigation of this aircraft, because everyone will be interested in finding out the truth so that this does not get repeated. But we should keep everything else outside of this.
Right. We're also getting bites from the family members of the victims. They're waiting for any kind of information that may come by as soon as possible. There are some waiting outside Gujarat's civil hospital. Let's play out those reactions.
हाँ मेरी शादी था वो अमृतसर थी लंदन जा रही थी।
हाँ फिर
हाँ बस वो 1 घंटे में समाचार आ गया को प्लेन क्रैश हो गया देखने भी नहीं मिला वो अंदर एंट्री नहीं मिली सिविल में।
हमारी बहन जा रही थी
1 बजे जा रही थी प्लेन
1:10 की फ्लाइट थी और जा रही थी लंदन। लंदन जाने से पहले ही क्रैश हो गया प्लेन।
All right, we're looking at all the information coming in. In fact, the initial report that came in about the Air India B787 aircraft at Ahmedabad, they said that this was flight AI-171 from Ahmedabad to Gatwick. It crashed immediately after takeoff from Ahmedabad. There were 242 people on board, and the aircraft had 2 pilots and 10 cabin crew as well. The aircraft was under the control of a captain who had almost 8,200 hours of flying experience. The co-pilot had 1,100 hours of flying experience. We are withholding names of the passengers on board the aircraft and also the pilots and the co-pilot because we're still hoping for good news that comes out from the investigation and from all the rescue teams which are on ground. As per the ATC, aircraft departed from Ahmedabad at 13:39 hours from the runway 23. It gave a mayday call to the ATC, but therefore, thereafter, no response was given by the aircraft to the calls by the ATC. Aircraft immediately after departure from runway 23 fell on ground outside the airport perimeter. Heavy black smoke was seen coming from the accident site. And Captain Wadia, immediately after that, we had rescue teams flying in. And of course, that's a protocol. There are rescue teams at the airport, always available on standby. I'm sure teams must have been called from outside as well, considering the gravity of the situation. But no one had time to react at all. But what's your thoughts on the rescue that is going on the ground? I'm sure that the rescue teams are doing a great job in this hour of crisis. It's a very difficult operation. And we just hope that we are able to find survivors on board.
I'm sure the rescue team, the fire brigade and the police, everyone must have done a wonderful job. And from the reports that are coming in from the site of the accident also, the rescue and people being taken to the hospital has been very efficient. And I think we're perfectly fine with that. But I have one more comment to make. It is important to investigate this accident. After all, Annexure 13 of ICAO, which is the United Nations, says very clearly, the aim of an accident is to prevent a recurrence and not to apportion blame. Along with this accident also, I hope we go into the normal practices of aviation safety in India and try and improve standards of aviation safety. I'll give you a small example. There are a lot of incidents where nothing drastic happens. No damages happen to the aircraft. No one is injured. No passengers problem. There are incidents which are just something like a dog on the runway or some minor incidents. In India, we hardly investigate these incidents. If you investigate the incidents properly, accidents will hardly ever happen. We need to focus on that very finely. To give you an example, in India, I have seen with my own experience, incidents are put under the carpet and no one bothers. In Australia, there was a near miss. Again, nothing happened. It was only an incident. But the chairman of the airport authority was removed after an investigation was held. So investigation of incidents is as important as accidents.
Mr. Sivaraman, do you agree that we need to have a better record of investigating such accidents and whatever happened here must be investigated thoroughly? A precedent must be set?
Well, Captain Wadia mentioned about an incident 4 days ago. I came by an Indigo flight from Calicut to Chennai. And I was standing in the queue to board the aircraft. They had brought down the garbage from inside the aircraft. The garbage bag was open. And the entire garbage, a few of those papers inside started flying all around. I called the man standing near the aircraft and told him, look, I am the former DGCA. This is a very serious matter. When the engine starts in this aircraft, this could get sucked in and there may be serious engine problem. They just laughed at me and walked up. Now,
that indeed is shocking.
I couldn't contact the pilot. I just stood there because I am now 85 years old. I am not in a position to fight with everybody. And I saw those garbage flying all around. Fortunately, it was an ATR aircraft. It had been a jet aircraft which was starting. They could have easily sucked into. This paper could have gone in. We don't know what was there inside, other garbage which was flying all around. So this is where I'm saying, in this country, my experience of 40, 50 years in government and in other areas, I find supervision is lacking. Supervision by the senior people, taking responsibility by the senior people, that is lacking. You pass the buck down at every time. And for example, in the aircraft tarmac area, so many aircraft are maneuvering. Aircraft are starting engines, aircraft are stopping the engines, passengers are being put in the buses and being taken out. Nobody is supervising it. Now, this kind of a garbage is flying around. Who is there to check that? Somebody must be there to check it. Unfortunately, this doesn't happen. That is why we have these accidents. You remember the accident of that aircraft in this supersonic aircraft which crashed in UK because it sucked in some grit or some iron pieces. Although they do take precaution, they run a check on the runways, etc. But there are some runways where I felt as though I was riding a horse. I was not in a plane. I was riding a horse. And the pilots would have definitely complained about the condition of the runway. Nobody would have taken action on it.
Right.
So these are certain things.
Mr. Sivaraman, those are very important points, and I would just want to give our viewers some updates that have come in. In fact, the Boeing company has put out a latest statement. They're saying we're in contact with Air India regarding Flight 171 and stand ready to support them. Our thoughts are with the passengers, crew, first responders, and all those who are affected. There are also reports coming in from a number of international agencies about the situation of those who were on board that tragic flight. But you know what? We are going to wait for the Indian authorities to give us a final word and to say formally what has actually happened. We'll wait for that. We'll our thoughts and prayers with everyone right now, but we'll wait for a final word from the Indian government on record on what has happened. We're awaiting a bite from the police as well. What's happening on the ground? You're seeing officials from the fire department, from the police, aviation authorities, who are there at the spot, also at the hostel where the plane crash took place. They're trying to douse the flames. There would be search and rescue teams as well to see if there are survivors. We also believe that there is a lot of activity at the nearest hospital as well. And we will get updates from the hospital authorities as well. A statement has come in from the Indian Army. The Indian Army has said that they're extending all assistance to civil administration after the flight crash in Ahmedabad. 130 personnel from the Army have been deployed to assist civil administration in this disaster relief efforts following the crash of Air India flight. The Indian Army's response includes engineering teams with JCBs, medical teams and quick action teams, firefighting assets. So essentially what we're trying to say, and also a military hospital has been placed on standby, that when a situation like this happens, you've got all authorities on board, all hands on deck. That's what we're seeing right now to possibly resolve the situation at the earliest. The operations at the Ahmedabad Airport had been suspended, but we've now got information that the operations there have resumed as well. You've got the DGCA teams there. You've got the aviation minister who's left for the location. He would be possibly reaching there in a short while from now. And it's important for perhaps VIPs. Often questions are raised about whether VIPs can actually help in a situation like that or distract the security forces. But it's also perhaps important to show solidarity with the victims, with the family members, and also with all the rescue teams that the government is standing by them. Definitely a very tricky, a very sensitive situation that is developing. Sanjay Lazar, if I can come back to you, and we really thank all our guests to stay on with us. The fact is, it's a developing situation. Very little information is coming by, and you're giving us your expert analysis, and we really value your time with CNBC TV 18 in this hour of crisis. But Sanjay, going forward, as Captain Wadia was pointing out, Mr. Sivaraman has also pointed out that do you feel that we're not taking aviation safety very, very seriously, and all private airliners, commercial airliners have to take a cue, some lesson from this as well going forward?
Well, I certainly will agree with both Captain Wadia and Mr. Sivaraman. I've, worked under both. I know them both very well. Very, very senior people in this industry. Far, years and years ahead of me. And if they say that safety is not being taken seriously, it's something that we all have to sit up and listen to, and ensure that we do. Having said that, I do believe that the DGCA in recent times has tightened up quite a bit, but there is scope for improvement with all airlines. Of course, they're all private now, barring Alliance. So, it's the airline industry at large that needs to look at this. We also need to understand, like Mark Martin was saying earlier about, pilot safety standards, FDTL, all those things now come into focus. We've been brushing things under the carpet, and it's not related to this case. I will not link it to this tragedy, but I'd like to just place on record that despite the previous government and the DGCA, pointing out that FDTL needed to be changed, there were airlines that were using commercial interests to extend it. So, these are things we need to be clear. We need to be a safety-first country. We need to be a safety-first aviation industry and follow all the norms. Running to courts to extend, certain concessions that were given is absolutely incorrect and unthinkable. I think we need to put our house in order, like Captain Wadia said, and I look forward to that. Right now, I think we need to stand shoulder to shoulder with Air India and the passengers and the people of Gujarat and India who've faced a huge tragedy.
Absolutely. And we're getting reactions from heads of state. Lawrence Wong, the Prime Minister of Singapore, has just said they're deeply saddened by the tragic Air India plane crash in Ahmedabad earlier today. The loss of so many lives is heartbreaking. We extend our deepest condolences to the families of those who lost their loved ones and to the people of India in this time of sorrow. We stand in solidarity with India. We've also seen comments come in from Ursula von der Leyen of the European Union, Anthony Albanese of Australia. We've seen comments from President Putin as well. So those reactions are coming in constantly. And this is, of course, really saddened many people in India and across the world. Questions, Mr. Sivaraman, about coordination with foreign governments. Considering that there were so many foreign nationals on board, what would be the kind of questions that foreign governments would be asking and the kind of coordination we would be having with them right now?
See, I want to make a point here. Under the law, the DGCA is a statutory authority. And if he lays down FDTL, the ministry has no business to interfere with it. And the DGCA has no business to listen to the ministry. If he lays down an FDTL for pilots on the basis of consultations with them, and that is law, the ministry has no business to interfere with it. I'm very sorry to hear that the commercial interests preceded the safety interest aspect of the pilots. And the DGCA also listened to the ministry. Now, as far as coordination of the foreign governments are concerned, I don't think many foreign governments will be interested in it, excepting those governments whose citizens have lost their lives, have been seriously injured. They would expect our government to look after them properly and also to give all the facilities for their dear ones to come to India if they are in the hospital or anything. Definitely the FAA, the Boeing, the GE, all these people would be already on board an aircraft, special aircraft, must be heading towards Ahmedabad now, because this is what happens. And every cooperation should be extended to them to assist us in the investigation. I don't think any politics or any minister or anybody should interfere in this matter, and they should leave it to the DGCA to coordinate all these efforts and the Accident Investigation Bureau to do its job without any interference from anybody.
All right. The news also coming in, Mr. Sivaraman, right now, and I'll get Mr. Wadia, Captain Wadia, to weigh in on this. N. Chandrasekaran, the chairman of Tata Sons, is meeting the Gujarat Chief Minister right now. A short while back, he had taken off from the Mumbai airport. He had left for Gujarat to meet the Chief Minister. Also important for the Chief of Tata Sons, the promoters, the owners of Air India, to be on spot at this time. what kind of a challenge does this really throw up for Tata Sons, for Air India, and especially after the Air India takeover by Tata Sons, Mr. Wadia?
The Tatas has a history of starting aviation in the country, but they've had a long period when they were not involved with aviation at all, and the government took over. Now, for them to restart the business, they have to start learning themselves. And I'll give you one point. In this entire thing of safety in this country, one of the important factors is education. Education all around, not only of the pilots, of the engineers, the cabin crew, everyone all around needs education. Now, I understand that Tatas themselves are starting a college on aviation education. My understanding is it should not be restricted to the Tata or to Air India itself only. India needs a major college on education in the whole aviation field. There are small airlines which cannot afford a college or something like that. There are charter airlines, there are helicopter consultants. So India needs a major educational institution for aviation for not only just technical aspects, but even things like MBA in aviation. How many people are aware of the international laws in aviation, the Geneva Convention, various things like that? So education is extremely important, and that now Tata, since they have the ability to have their own college, I would suggest that they don't do it only for Tatas, but for the whole country, an Indian Aviation Institute.
Right. So safety has to be a priority. If we want to be an aviation hub for the world, we want to make sure that our airlines have a big market share globally. We need to focus on safety, safety, safety. Let's also get in a statement from the Ahmedabad Civil Hospital on the plane crash.
फ्लाइट के जो पैसेंजर हैं, उनके जो सगे हैं, नज़दीक के सगे हैं, उनसे रिक्वेस्ट है कि डीएनए टेस्टिंग की व्यवस्था हम लोगों ने बीजे मेडिकल कॉलेज के कसौटी भवन में की है। आप सबसे अनुरोध है, जिसमें खास तौर पे माता पिता अथवा उनके पुत्र पुत्री नज़दीक के सगे होते हैं, आपसे रिक्वेस्ट है कि आप डीएनए सैंपल के लिए कसौटी भवन में बनी हुई व्यवस्था पर अपने सैंपल दें, ताकि दुर्घटना के जो विक्टिम हैं उनका आइडेंटिफिकेशन जल्दी से हो सके।
All right, so that was the hospital authorities not saying anything about the state of the survivors. They were saying that if there is DNA testing that has to be done, then they have arranged a place nearby where family members, where the loved ones can go. So we're not speculating about the state of those who were on board. We're awaiting a formal statement from the government, possibly from the aviation minister or even the Gujarat government for that matter. And those are the only statements we will take at this point. Let me go back to Sanjay Lazar at this point. Sanjay, what do you think would be happening on the ground in the hospital at the site of crash right now? Also, let's also comment on what happened at the hostel, because this plane crashed on a hospital, which I believe was at the perimeter of the airport premises.
Yes, and that was my first concern, apart from the passengers of the plane, is that, that hostel building, it was lunch hour, and there were a lot of students who'd probably come for the lunch break. So I hope, there was minimal casualty and fatality, if at all, any, because the aircraft tail seemed to broken off there and stuck on top of that hostel. The other thing is what will be happening, and what we've seen visuals of, is that the collector and the National Recovery Team and the disaster management team pulling out bodies and taking them to various hospitals. I don't know if there were any survivors or if there are any, but I do, like I said earlier in the show, about 40 bodies had been recovered. That process will continue through the evening, I'm sure. The clip that you just played showed somebody, from the hospital talking of DNA samples to identify the bodies. So the process of identification of bodies will now start through DNA and through, body tagging, whatever details are required, whether they're identification marks, jewelry, clothing, those sort of things. And then, of course, the process of post-mortem and then handing over of bodies eventually to the families. I also believe that the investigation team of the DGCA and the Aircraft Accident Investigation Board would have reached there by now. because they were traveling on a special flight, and they will take charge of the site and look into the matter instantly, try and recover the DFDR and the CFR, the black boxes, so to speak, and start decoding it. The ACARS messages, etc., that were received will also be, transmuted and seen into what has happened.
All right. One important statement that has come in from the Federal Aviation Administration, which is a part of the US government. They have put out a statement, Mr. Sivaraman, and they said the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration of the US, is in contact with the National Transportation Safety Board regarding Air India flight AI-171 operating from Ahmedabad to London Gatwick that was involved in an accident. Whenever an international incident occurs, the government concerned leads the investigation. In the event assistance is required, the National Transportation Safety Board is the official US representative and the FAA provides technical support. We stand ready to launch a team immediately in coordination with the National Transportation Safety Board. Do you think, Mr. Sivaraman, that the Indian government should be taking assistance from the FAA and the NTSB, the Federal Aviation Administration, and the National Transportation Safety Board of the United States?
Of course. There is no ego in this matter. FAA and the NTSB have got enormous facilities, the most modern facilities available in the world for accident investigation. We should take their assistance because this is a very serious matter which involves one of the best aircraft in the world. Therefore, we must take their assistance. We involved the entire Airbus industry engineers in the investigation of the Airbus 320 aircraft accident that took place in Bangalore. All of them were here. We took their assistance.
Absolutely. And let's hope we take the best assistance from all around with friendly countries and get to the bottom of this as soon as possible. Lessons must be learned so that incidents like this must be avoided at all costs in future. And our panelists have pointed out concerns around aviation safety in India. And let's hope that both companies, the private sector, and also the government take note of what has happened. With that, it's a wrap on this special broadcast, and our thoughts and prayers with the families of those who were on board that ill-fated flight.